Welcome back to True Life Stories. If you're watching this from anywhere around the world, drop a comment below and let us know where you're joining us from today. On a crisp autumn morning in downtown Columbus, Ohio, what started as a routine coffee run would become a moment that would capture the attention of everyone present, revealing how status and humility can collide in the most unexpected ways. The line at Capitol Grounds coffee shop stretched nearly to the door, filled with the usual mix of business professionals and local residents seeking their morning brew. None of them could have predicted how the next few minutes would unfold, or that they were about to witness an encounter that would remind them about the true meaning of respect and dignity. Among those waiting patiently in line was Usha Vance, though at that moment, none of the other customers recognized her. Dressed in a simple navy blazer and slacks, she stood quietly reviewing emails on her phone, just another face in the morning crowd. The atmosphere was typical for a busy coffee shop. The gentle hum of conversation, the whirring of espresso machines, and the soft jazz playing overhead created a peaceful backdrop to the start of everyone's day. That serenity was about to be shattered by the arrival of Alexander Moore, a high-powered executive from one of the city's most prominent financial firms. His presence was announced before he even fully entered the shop, his loud voice carrying through the door as he barked orders into his Bluetooth earpiece. His designer suit and imperious demeanor seemed to demand attention, but not in the way he might have hoped. The next few moments would unfold like a scene from a movie, though this was anything but scripted. Moore, apparently deciding his time was more valuable than everyone else's, strode directly to the front of the line, barely acknowledging the dozen or so people he had just bypassed. The barista behind the counter, Olivia Harris, a college student, working her way through school, visibly tensed as she recognized him. This wasn't the first time he had pulled such a stunt. The other customers exchanged uncomfortable glances, their faces showing a mixture of resignation and annoyance. It was the kind of situation everyone had experienced before, someone using their perceived importance to bypass the rules that applied to everyone else. Most people would typically remain silent, not wanting to create a scene or risk confrontation with someone who clearly wielded significant local influence. But this morning would be different. As Moore began rattling off his complicated order, a triple-shot espresso with precise specifications about temperature and foam consistency, a calm, measured voice spoke up from the middle of the line. "Excuse me, sir, but I believe the line starts back here." The words were spoken with such quiet authority that several heads turned to identify their source. Usha Vance stood there, her phone now tucked away in her pocket, her expression both firm and remarkably composed. Moore turned slowly, his face reflecting more annoyance than embarrassment. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his tone suggesting that the answer should immediately resolve any objection to his behavior. The irony of his question would soon become apparent to everyone present. "Yes, Mr. Moore, I believe I do," Usha replied, her voice maintaining its steady calm. "You're the CEO of Midwest Financial Partners, and I'm quite certain that your success is built on understanding the importance of treating everyone with respect, isn't it?" The subtle emphasis she placed on the word everyone carried volumes of meaning. Moore's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face as he tried to place who this woman might be. The other customers watched in fascinated silence as the scene unfolded. "I have a meeting in 10 minutes, he stated, as if this justified his actions. "Surely you understand that some people's time is more valuable?" Usha gently cut him off, her words carrying a weight that would soon become clear to everyone. "Every person in this line has somewhere to be, Mr. Moore. The teacher behind me has a classroom waiting. The nurse in front of you probably just finished a night shift. Time is valuable to everyone, wouldn't you agree?" The way she spoke, with such quiet confidence and unshakable conviction, caused Moore to take a closer look at her. Recognition slowly dawned on his face as he finally placed who was addressing him. Usha Vance, respected attorney, community leader and wife of the state's senior United States Senator. More importantly, she was known throughout Columbus for her advocacy for equal treatment and ethical business practices. The color slowly drained from Moore's face as he realized the full implications of the situation. Here he was, attempting to defend preferential treatment to someone whose life's work included fighting against exactly this type of entitled behavior. The irony was lost on no one present. But what happened next would demonstrate why Usha Vance's influence extended far beyond her impressive credentials. Instead of pressing her advantage or attempting to embarrass Moore further, she simply gestured to the back of the line and said, "Why don't you join us? I've found some of the most interesting conversations happen while waiting in line for coffee." The gentle way she handled the situation, offering Moore a graceful way to correct his behavior rather than publicly shaming him, spoke volumes about her character. It was a masterclass in how to stand up for what's right while still maintaining everyone's dignity. Moore stood frozen for a moment, clearly weighing his options. The entire coffee shop seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see how this would play out. Finally, his shoulders dropped slightly, and a different kind of recognition crossed his face, the recognition that he had been wrong and was being offered a chance to make it right. "Of course," he said quietly, all traces of his earlier arrogance gone. "You're absolutely right." He moved to the back of the line, offering a quiet, "I apologize" to each person he passed. The tension in the air immediately dissolved, replaced by a sense of collective relief and, perhaps, a touch of admiration for how the situation had been handled. What happened next would transform this moment from a simple correction of bad behavior into something more meaningful. As Moore took his place at the back of the line, Usha turned and engaged him in conversation. Those nearby would later recall hearing them discuss community involvement and corporate responsibility. By the time they reached the counter, Moore was taking notes on his phone about local mentorship programs that his firm might support. The barista, Olivia, who had watched the entire scene unfold, would later share that she had never seen such a perfect example of how to turn a confrontation into a conversation. When Moore finally reached the counter, his entire demeanor had changed. He ordered his coffee with please and thank you, and even left a generous tip in the jar. But the story doesn't end there. The incident quickly became a talking point throughout Columbus's business community, not because anyone tried to shame Moore. In fact, Usha never spoke publicly about it, but because Moore himself began sharing the story. At a Chamber of Commerce meeting the following week, he used it as an example of how leadership isn't about asserting authority, but about recognizing the dignity in every person. The Capitol Grounds coffee shop saw some changes too. They posted a small sign near the counter that read, "Every person's time is valuable. Thank you for waiting in line." It was a subtle reminder of that morning's events, and employees would notice more, reading it with a slight smile whenever he visited, now always waiting patiently in line like everyone else. The incident became a quiet legend in downtown Columbus, not for the confrontation, but for how it demonstrated that true leadership isn't about demanding respect, but about showing it to others. It proved that sometimes the most powerful people are those who use their influence not to push ahead, but to ensure everyone is treated fairly. For those who witnessed it, that morning served as a powerful reminder that it's not our titles or positions that define us, but how we treat others, especially when we think no one of consequence is watching. As it turns out, someone of consequence is always watching, and sometimes they're kind enough to help us become better versions of ourselves. The next time you're tempted to use your status to step ahead of others, remember the quiet dignity of Usha Vance and how she transformed a moment of confrontation into an opportunity for growth. Sometimes the most important leadership lessons come while waiting in line for coffee. Let us know in the comments below if you've ever witnessed someone standing up for what's right in such a graceful way. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more true stories that remind us about the power of dignity and respect in our everyday interactions. This is True Life Stories, reminding you that every person deserves respect, regardless of their position in line or in life. What happened at Capitol Grounds coffee shop that morning was just the beginning of a story that would ripple through Columbus's business community in unexpected ways. As we continue this true account, we'll see how one moment of grace and accountability would transform not just Alexander Moore, but an entire corporate culture. The day after the coffee shop incident, Moore arrived at the headquarters of Midwest, financial partners earlier than usual. The expansive glass building that housed his firm's offices had always felt like a symbol of his success, but this morning he saw it differently. As he walked through the lobby, he found himself really looking at the security guards, the cleaning staff, the maintenance workers, people he had passed by countless times before without truly seeing. The memory of Usha Vance's words echoed in his mind. Every person in this line has somewhere to be. It was a simple observation that had somehow managed to crack the carefully constructed facade of superiority he had built around himself. As he rode the elevator to the executive floor, he realized he had a decision to make. Would this be just another embarrassing incident to push past, or could it become a catalyst for real change? The answer came sooner than expected. When he reached his office, he found an email from Usha Vance waiting in his inbox. It wasn't the stern reprimand he might have expected. Instead, it was an invitation, one that would set in motion a series of events that would reshape his company's entire approach to community engagement. Mr. Moore, the email began, I appreciated our conversation yesterday about corporate responsibility and community involvement. If you're interested, I'm hosting a roundtable discussion next week with local business leaders and community organizers. We'll be discussing ways to bridge the gap between corporate success and community well-being. Your perspective would be valuable. For a moment, Moore sat staring at his computer screen. The easy thing would be to send a polite decline, to retreat back into the comfortable isolation of executive privilege. But something had shifted in him during that coffee shop encounter. The way Usha had handled the situation, with firmness but without humiliation, had shown him a different kind of leadership. He clicked reply and typed 2 words. I'll attend. What Moore didn't know then was that this decision would mark the beginning of a transformation that would extend far beyond himself. The roundtable discussion would prove to be just the first step in a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about power, influence, and success. The meeting was held in a community center in one of Columbus's underserved neighborhoods, a deliberate choice that Usha had made to ensure business leaders would step out of their comfort zones. As Moore walked from his car to the building, he noticed things he might have missed before. The single mother hurrying to get her children to school, the elderly gentleman carefully maintaining a small community garden, the young entrepreneurs setting up their small businesses for the day. Inside, he found himself sitting alongside other corporate leaders, community activists, small business owners, and local residents. Usha had carefully curated the group to ensure all voices would be heard. The discussion that followed would open Moore's eyes to perspectives he had never considered. A young woman named Amelia Martinez, owner of a small local coffee shop in the neighborhood, spoke about the challenges of competing with large chains. Her words made Moore think about how many times he had dismissed small businesses as irrelevant to his world of high finance. A community organizer named Benjamin Harris described the ripple effects of corporate decisions on local families. Each story added another crack to Moore's previously impenetrable worldview, but it was when Usha Vance spoke about the concept of servant leadership that everything clicked into place for Moore. She shared her belief that true power comes not from asserting authority, but from using one's position to lift others up. As she spoke, Moore couldn't help but remember how she had handled their encounter at the coffee shop, not by humiliating him, but by offering him a chance to be better. The meeting lasted 3 hours, but its impact would be felt for years to come. As Moore drove back to his office, his mind was already racing with ideas. The next morning, he called an emergency meeting of his executive team. The agenda was simple but revolutionary. How could Midwest Financial Partners become a force for positive change in the community? The transformation began with small changes. Moore instituted a new policy requiring all executive team members to spend 1 day each month working alongside entry-level employees. He himself set the example, starting with the mailroom. James Wilson, who had been sorting mail at the company for 15 years, would later recall his shock at seeing the CEO asking him to explain the intricacies of the company's internal mail system. The company's annual budget meeting took on a different tone that year. Instead of focusing solely on profit margins, Moore introduced a new metric: community impact. He established a significant fund for local business development with a particular focus on underserved neighborhoods. The program would provide not just loans, but mentorship and support to help ensure success. But perhaps the most significant change was in Moore himself. Employees began to notice a difference in how he carried himself, how he interacted with others. The imperious executive who had once cut in line at a coffee shop was replaced by someone who made a point of learning every employee's name, who stopped to hold doors open, who actually listened during meetings instead of just waiting for his turn to speak. The coffee shop incident became a part of the company's training program, though not in the way one might expect. Moore himself would tell the story during new employee orientations, using it as an example of how a moment of humility could lead to meaningful change. Leadership, he would say, isn't about being first in line. It's about ensuring everyone in line is treated with dignity. 6 months after the coffee shop encounter, Moore found himself back at Capitol grounds. This time, he not only waited in line, but spent time chatting with other customers. When he reached the counter, he was surprised to find Olivia Harris, the barista from that memorable morning, still working there. "You probably don't remember me," he began, but Olivia cut him off with a smile. "Of course I do, Mr. Moore. You're here every Tuesday morning now, always in line like everyone else." Her words carried no judgment, only recognition of how things had changed. That's when Moore learned that his transformation had had an unexpected ripple effect. Olivia shared how other executives who frequented the coffee shop had noticed his change in behavior. Gradually, the entitled attitude that had once been common among certain customers had all but disappeared. It seemed that leadership, both good and bad, was indeed contagious. The story might have ended there, but fate had one more twist in store. 1 year to the day after the original incident, Moore found himself standing in line at Capitol grounds again. This time, he was there to announce a new initiative. Midwest Financial Partners would be launching a program to help small, local coffee shops compete with large chains by providing business development resources and favorable financing terms. The first recipient of this program would be Amelia Martinez, the young woman from the roundtable discussion. Her small coffee shop would receive not just financial support, but ongoing mentorship from Moore himself. When asked why he had chosen to focus on coffee shops, Moore's answer was simple: Sometimes the most important business lessons happen while waiting in line for coffee. The changes at Midwest Financial Partners didn't go unnoticed in the broader business community. Other companies began to follow their lead, implementing similar community engagement programs. The ripple effect continued to spread, touching more lives and transforming more communities. As for Usha Vance, she never sought credit for her role in this transformation. When asked about it, she would simply say that she had merely pointed out what everyone already knew, that dignity and respect should be universal values, not privileges based on status or position. Moore kept the small sign from Capitol grounds, "Coffee shop, every person's time is valuable," framed on his office wall. It served as a daily reminder that sometimes the most powerful leadership lessons come not from business school, but from simple moments of human interaction. The story of that morning at Capitol grounds became more than just a tale of an executive and cutting in line. It became a testament to the power of graceful correction, the importance of humble leadership, and the truth that real change often begins with a simple choice to do better. If you've been moved by this story, share it with someone who might need to hear it. And remember, whether you're a CEO or a barista, your actions have the power to inspire change in others. Drop a comment below about a time when you witnessed someone's transformation, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the power of human dignity and respect. This is True Life Stories, reminding you that it's never too late to become a better version of yourself. As our story continues, we see how a single moment of accountability in a coffee shop grew into a movement that would reshape the relationship between Columbus's business, community, and its residents. But more importantly, we'll discover how true change often comes from the most unexpected places. 18 months after the original incident at Capitol Grounds coffee shop, the landscape of downtown Columbus had begun to shift in subtle but significant ways. The transformation that had started with Alexander Moore's encounter with Usha Vance had sparked a chain reaction that no one could have predicted. On a warm spring morning, Olivia Harris, the barista who had witnessed the original confrontation, stood behind the counter at Capitol Grounds, watching a scene that would have seemed impossible 2 years ago. The line stretched to the door as usual, but there was something different about it. CEOs chatted casually with maintenance workers, administrative assistants shared jokes with delivery drivers, and everyone waited their turn with patience and respect. What made this morning particularly special was that it marked the opening of the 10th small business under the Midwest Financial Partners Community Development Initiative. The program, which had started with Amelia Martinez's coffee shop, had expanded far beyond its original scope. But to understand how this transformation happened, we need to look at the events that unfolded in the months following Moore's change of heart. It began when Victoria Thompson, CEO of another prominent Columbus firm, witnessed Moore waiting in line one morning at Capitol Grounds. She had known Moore for years and had always associated him with the kind of entitled behavior he had once displayed. Seeing him not only waiting patiently, but engaging warmly with those around him sparked her curiosity. "Alex," she called out to him that morning, "I hardly recognized you without your usual rush to the front." Her tone was light, but her interest was genuine. Moore's response would become another turning point in our story. Instead of brushing off the comment, Moore invited Thompson to join him for coffee. Over the next hour, he shared the story of his encounter with Usha Vance and the journey it had sparked. By the end of their conversation, Thompson wasn't just intrigued. She was inspired to create change in her own organization. Within weeks, a small group of Columbus's most influential business leaders had formed what they called the Community First Coalition. Their mission was simple: to transform how corporate power intersected with community needs. But what made this initiative different was its approach. Under Usha Vance's guidance, the coalition didn't just throw money at problems. They invested time, presence, and genuine attention. Every member committed to spending time in different parts of the community, learning firsthand about the challenges and opportunities that existed beyond their corporate bubbles. The impact of this approach became evident in unexpected ways. Emma Ramirez, a high school student who worked part-time at one of Emilia Martinez's coffee shops, found herself explaining the importance of affordable business loans to Alexander Moore during one of his regular visits. Her insights, drawn from watching her mother struggle to keep a small business afloat, would later influence the coalition's lending policies. The program that had started with helping local coffee shops soon expanded to include other small businesses. The coalition established a mentorship network that paired experienced executives with aspiring entrepreneurs from underserved communities. But perhaps most importantly, they created a new model of corporate engagement that went beyond traditional charitable giving. Olivia Harris, who had witnessed the original incident, found herself at the center of this transformation. She had continued working at Capitol grounds while pursuing her business degree, and her unique perspective on the changes she'd observed caught Moore's attention. To everyone's surprise, he offered her an internship at Midwest Financial Partners. Not in the executive suite, but in the community development program, Olivia's experience as a barista proved invaluable. She understood something that many executives had missed, that coffee shops weren't just businesses, they were community hubs where people from all walks of life intersected. This insight would reshape how the coalition approached community development. Under Olivia's influence, the program began to focus on creating spaces that fostered community connection. Every new business supported by the initiative was designed with this principle in mind. Conference rooms were made available for community meetings, wall space was dedicated to local artists, and each venue was required to include some form of community gathering space. The impact extended beyond the business community. Local schools began incorporating lessons about ethical leadership and community responsibility into their curricula. The story of the coffee shop incident became a case study in how small moments of accountability could lead to lasting change. But perhaps the most profound change could be seen in the daily interactions throughout the city. The principle that every person's time is valuable had evolved into a broader understanding that every person's dignity was valuable. This shift in perspective began to influence everything from customer service policies to hiring practices. 1 year into the initiative, Usha Vance organized a community feedback session. The stories shared that day revealed how deeply the changes had penetrated. A janitor spoke about how executives now knew his name and asked about his family. A small business owner described how her relationship with her bank had transformed from intimidation to partnership. A high school student shared how watching these changes had inspired her to pursue a business degree with a focus on community development. The session was held at Emilia Martinez's coffee shop, which had grown into a thriving business. As people shared their stories, Emilia served coffee with a quiet pride. Her shop had become more than just a success story. It was a symbol of what was possible when business leaders chose to use their influence for community good. Moore, sitting in the audience that day, found himself deeply moved by the impact of what had started with his moment of humbling at Capitol grounds. During a break in the session, he stepped out to get some air and found himself standing next to Olivia Harris, who was now splitting her time between barista work and her internship. "Did you ever imagine," she asked him, "that your attempt to cut in line would lead to all this?" Moore's response captured the essence of what had changed. The line, he said, was never about coffee. It was about seeing the humanity in everyone waiting with you. The initiative continued to grow, but its fundamental principle remained the same: True leadership isn't about being first in line. It's about ensuring everyone in line is treated with dignity and respect. The coalition's work began attracting attention from other cities, with business leaders coming to Columbus to learn how they could implement similar programs in their communities. But for those who had witnessed the original incident at Capitol grounds, the most meaningful change wasn't in the programs or initiatives. It was in the small daily interactions that showed how a community's culture could be transformed when leaders chose to lead with humility and respect. If you've been touched by this story of transformation, share it with others who might need to hear it. Drop a comment below about how a small moment of accountability has created positive change in your community. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about how individual choices can lead to collective transformation. This is True Life Stories, reminding you that every interaction is an opportunity to create positive change. 2 years to the day after the incident that started it all, Capitol Grounds Coffee Shop was hosting a special event. The small establishment had become something of a local landmark, known not just for its coffee, but for the story that had transformed Columbus's business culture. But today's gathering would bring our story full circle in ways that none of the participants could have anticipated. The morning began like any other, with the familiar line of customers stretching to the door. But today, there was an added energy in the air. The shop was celebrating the launch of the Community Leadership Institute, a new initiative that would take the lessons learned over the past 2 years and formalize them into a program for future. Business leaders, Olivia Harris, who had witnessed the original confrontation between Alexander Moore and Usha Vance, stood behind the counter one last time. After graduating with her business degree, she had accepted a full-time position with the Community First Coalition, but she had asked to work this particular shift for its symbolic significance. As she prepared the morning's first batch of coffee, she reflected on how much had changed. The sign that read, "Every person's time is valuable," had been joined by others throughout the shop, each capturing a principle that had emerged from the transformation. Leadership begins with listening. Success is measured by impact, not status, and community before privilege. The bell above the door chimed as Alexander Moore entered. He was no longer the imperious executive who had once demanded special treatment. Instead, he waited at the end of the line, greeting fellow customers with genuine warmth. But today was different. He wasn't here just for coffee. At precisely 9 a.m., Usha Vance arrived. The woman who had sparked this transformation with her quiet dignity 2 years ago had agreed to be the keynote speaker at the Institute's launch. As she entered, conversations hushed briefly as customers recognized her, many smiling in appreciation of her role in the changes they'd witnessed. What happened next would become another story passed down through Columbus's business community. As Usha made her way to the back of the line, Moore approached her with a cup of coffee, one he had waited in line to purchase. "I saved you a spot," he said, gesturing to where he had been standing. "I figured after 2 years it was time to return the favor." The symbolism of the moment wasn't lost on anyone present. The man who had once pushed his way to the front was now intentionally moving to the back, making space for others. It was a small gesture, but it embodied everything the Community Leadership Institute stood for. As the morning's formal program began, the coffee shop had been transformed into an intimate gathering space. Local business leaders sat alongside community members, baristas, and small business owners. The hierarchy that had once seemed so important had been replaced by a sense of shared purpose. Usha Vance took her place at the small podium that had been set up near the counter. Her speech would later be quoted in business schools and leadership seminars, but its power lay in its simplicity. 2 years ago, she began, A moment of tension in this very spot became a catalyst for change. But the real story isn't about that moment. It's about what happened afterward, how one person's choice to respond to correction with humility sparked a movement that would transform our community. She went on to describe how the incident had revealed a truth about leadership that many had forgotten, that true influence comes not from asserting power, but from using it to lift others up. She spoke about how the Community Leadership Institute would work to embed these principles in the next generation of business leaders. But the most powerful moment came when she invited others to share their stories. One by one, people stood to speak about how the changes of the past 2 years had affected them. Amelia Martinez described how her coffee shop had become a model for community-centered business. Benjamin Harris shared how the Community First Coalition had transformed his neighborhood. Victoria Thompson spoke about how her company's culture had shifted after she witnessed Moore's change. Emma Ramirez, the high school student who had once explained community banking to Moore, announced that she had been accepted to business school on a scholarship provided by the coalition. Her dream was to create more opportunities for young entrepreneurs from underserved communities. As the speeches continued, Olivia Harris noticed something remarkable. The line for coffee hadn't disappeared during the program. Instead, customers had organically formed small groups, sharing their own stories and experiences while waiting their turn. The line had become exactly what Usha had suggested 2 years ago, a place where meaningful conversations could happen. When Moore took the podium, his words were brief but profound. "Leadership," he said, "isn't about being first in line. It's about making sure the line leads somewhere worth going." He then announced that Midwest Financial Partners would be expanding its community development program to 5 more cities, with Olivia Harris leading the initiative. The launch concluded with the unveiling of a small plaque near the counter. It told the story of what had happened that morning 2 years ago, not to commemorate the conflict, but to celebrate the transformation it had sparked. The plaque's final words captured the essence of everything that had changed. Every moment is an opportunity to choose dignity over privilege, community over status, and respect over power. As the formal program ended and the coffee shop returned to its normal rhythm, something beautiful happened. The line that had once been a source of tension became a place of connection. Executives chatted with students about their aspirations. Small business owners exchanged ideas with corporate leaders. The barriers that had once seemed so rigid had dissolved into something more human and real. Usha Vance stayed until the last guest had left, talking with everyone who approached her. As she prepared to leave, she stopped at the counter where Olivia was finishing her final shift as a barista. "Did you ever imagine," Olivia asked, echoing her question to Moore from months earlier, "that standing up that morning would lead to all this?" Usha smiled. "Change doesn't always announce itself with grand gestures," she replied. "Sometimes it starts with simply reminding people of who they can choose to be." As she left the coffee shop, she passed the line of customers still waiting, patiently for their turn. Each face represented a story, each person an opportunity for connection. The lesson that had started 2 years ago continued to ripple outward. That every interaction, no matter how small, carries the potential for transformation. If this story has touched you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below about a time when you witnessed the power of humble leadership. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about how small moments can lead to lasting change. This is True Life Stories, reminding you that it's never too late to choose a better way forward, and that sometimes the most important leadership lessons happen while waiting in line for coffee.